Hello there, welcome back to the recordings on the specific kind of fallacies, and in this recording we'll focus on violations of the standpoint rule, which is the third rule for a critical discussion. And in total there are 10, so there are 7 more to go, but this one is very essential, and that is because the standpoint rule lays down that a party's attack on a standpoint must relate to the standpoint that has indeed been advanced by the other party. So this is really important because if you don't attack that standpoint in a fair way, you will be talking at cross purposes and your difference of opinion cannot be resolved. Now, it sounds like this rule only applies to the antagonist, right? So the antagonist is the one who attacks the other party's standpoint. So it sounds like the protagonist has nothing to do with this. But this is not always the case. So take, for example, the following utterance by, let's assume this is the protagonist. Then this protagonist says, "I think that online courses should be the norm, but as an historian, she will surely be opposed to this." So see what this protagonist is doing. This person is creating an antagonist who is presumably a historian and who presumably opposes online courses as the norm because she is a historian. Now, this person might not exist, or this person might hold different opinions, and in those cases, it's not really fair to represent this person's standpoint in this way. So this is quite problematic. Another situation in which you can see that something is going wrong with this standpoint rule is the following. So let's assume that A this time says, "At the moment, I think that online courses are helpful, but we shouldn't digitalize the entire university." And then B replies, "I completely disagree. Why are you so opposed to online courses?" Now this time, B's reaction isn't really appropriate, I would say, because A actually says that online courses are helpful, but not, the digitalization shouldn't go further. So attacking A for saying that she's opposed to online courses is really not fair. And in fact, these two examples illustrate a particular violation of the standpoint rule, which results in the fallacy that is called the strawman fallacy. And a strawman fallacy, well, we now have seen the two ways in which you can commit this fallacy. You can either attribute a fictitious standpoint to the other party, as was done in the first example that I showed, or you could misrepresent the other party's standpoint. So you could either exaggerate the standpoint or simplify it so that it is easier to attack. And that is always what happens with the strawman fallacy, because you're setting up a strawman instead of a real person who's in front of you and who's arguing strongly, but you set up this strawman that you can attack quite easily and who cannot really attack back. And so you just overwhelm the strawman, throw it down, and act as though you've won the discussion. So that's the problematic part of, this fallacy. So now, let's turn to a real-life example, because I use some simplified examples, but in real life it's far more difficult to detect a strawman fallacy. But I think I have an example for you. And the example, if you follow the honors class, you already know, because it's an example taken from assignment 1. And in assignment 1, we focused on this article by Sean O'Grady. It appeared in the Independent, and it was about electric cars. And as you can see, the title already says that he argues for or in favor of actually more policies that allow sort of investment in electric cars. So he says electric cars are the future. When will the government start taking them seriously? And I highlighted some parts of this text here. For instance, I highlighted the part in line 6. So when it comes to the climate emergency by the long-term policy targets. And just before that, O'Grady says, as the saying goes, judge them by their words, not by their deeds. And he's referring here to the government, and he says, well, we should judge the government, the UK government in this case, by oh, I said it just, I realized that I said judge them by their words, not by their deeds, but I meant, of course, the other way around. So judge them by their deeds, not by their words. Sorry about that. But anyway, he argues that we should judge the UK government by their deeds, and the deeds referring to actually investing more in electric cars, because he says electronic cars or electric cars are the future. He's actually saying, well, they're cheaper and they're more and more available, but there's a difficulty for people in the UK because not everyone has access to charging points. And so in the end, it jumps here from line 13 to line 36. And in 36 you see the ending of the article. So O'Grady says they have yet to live up to their laudable ambitions with the kind of investment that is so clearly needed. And that's again a reference to the politicians in the UK. So basically, long story short, what I have identified as the standpoint here is something like the UK government has to live up to their laudable ambitions with the kind of long-term investments that's so clearly required to deal with the climate emergency. So that's the sort of main message in this article, and you can check it for yourself. You can just look it up online. But then there was a letter to the editor reacting to this article by O'Grady. And this person, Chris Shepherd, he actually sent in this letter and said, and just read with me, he said, Sean O'Grady's recent article about electric cars seems to assume that they, the electric cars, are the only solution to future mobility and the environment. Well, in fact, if you read through the entire text by O'Grady, you can see that nowhere does he say that it is the only solution to future mobility and the environment. He just says that it is good for the environment to drive an electric car, and the government should implement policies that allow as many as possible, or many people as possible, to drive such electric cars in the UK. So, just as a reminder, this highlighted part in Shepherd's letter has nothing, or doesn't fairly represent the real standpoint that O'Grady put forward. So here we could probably speak of a strawman fallacy. Now the good thing, or the good news now, is for this recording, this is it, because the only way by means of which you can violate the standpoint rule is by committing a strawman fallacy. So either by putting a standpoint in someone's shoes that isn't really his or her standpoint, or by misrepresenting someone's standpoint, as was the case in the letter example. So this is it. Thank you for listening, and talk to you soon.